indication of something more concerning. So first, 80% of children between the ages of 12 and 24 months display aggressive behaviors, tantrums, defiance, or other externalizing behaviors. So as you can see from this statistic, it's very, very common to see these things in toddlers. For about 50% of these cases, these problems persist for 12 or more months later. Now, we do need to be mindful of the fact that these behaviors can be a sign of an emerging disruptive or psychological behavior disorder if we're seeing them extend for a significant amount of time. Even though if these behaviors are just causing you a lot of stress and frustration or dissatisfaction with being a parent, these would all be signs and indications that some extra support would be beneficial. But once again, I'm hoping to give you some tips and tricks today on how to get started in really addressing these behaviors in your toddlers. So what does emotion regulation look like in toddlers? First, we view disruptive behaviors in children less than 2 years old as being signs of emotional dysregulation rather than deliberate intentional attention seeking or coercive acts. So and I would say this probably extends even up until about 2.5. So when we're seeing kids older than 2.5 exhibit these disruptive behaviors, things like aggression, oppositionality, destructive behaviors, tantruming, we're now more so thinking about, is this child exhibiting these behaviors basically to get their way? So that tends to be something that we see more in the older kids, where when we're seeing these disruptive behaviors in the younger kiddos, 2.5 and younger, we see it more as just being because of an inability to regulate their emotions. And so there isn't this deliberate nature to it. It's not necessarily they're having a big tantrum, they're getting really angry just because they want their way. It's more so they are overwhelmed with how they're feeling in that moment. And so they actually need our support to regulate and figure out how they can manage their own emotions. The way that we want to work on emotional regulation is really through the parent-child attachment relationship. This is the vehicle through which capacities for emotion and behavior regulation emerge and then are consolidated. So that is why these tips that I'll be giving are all about things that you can be including in that parent-child dynamic to really be supporting your child in regulating. We know, though, that toddlers really require scaffolding and assistance by caregivers to assist in learning emotion regulation. So when kiddos are between 12 months and 2 years old, it's not necessarily the time to always use like the cry it out method. There will be times where that is important, but when we're more so thinking it's because of a big emotion, that is actually a time when they need our support to figure out how to learn those techniques and skills that we might use to regulate our own emotions. And in doing this, we really need ourselves to have good emotion regulation as well, right? We serve as models for our children. So our children pick up when we're feeling frustrated, when we're feeling angry, even if we're feeling nervous. And if they look to us and we're kind of having a big reaction or a big emotion of our own, they're going to learn to respond in the same way. So part of the skills that I teach today will also be targeting how you can have good emotion regulation during times of stress, which are so typical and going to happen as being a parent of a toddler. So the big question is, how can you help your toddler and yourself during this developmental stage? There are really 3 things that we're going to be focusing on today, and I'm going to give you concrete ways of how to focus on those 3 things. First and foremost, I want to teach you how you can be attending to your toddler's behavior. We really see that if we're attending to the things that our children are already doing well, we can actually make a significant change in their behavior and for the better. So first and foremost, we want to be attending to and paying attention to toddlers' positive behavior. Second, we need to help our toddlers manage their big emotions. And third, we need to help ourselves in managing our own thoughts and feelings. So these are the three goals of this webinar, the things that I'm hoping to teach you today. So before I get into all of the tools and techniques, I need to give credit where credit is due. All of these strategies are being taken from parent-child interaction therapy for toddlers. A little background on the model. Parent-child interaction therapy, or PCIT, was developed for children between the ages of 2.5 up until the age of 7. It was really developed for children with significant disruptive behavior. So you're thinking about significant oppositionality, hyperactivity, aggression, tantrums, destruction. And it was found to be extremely effective in changing the behavior in these children. So, more recently, a team of clinicians adapted this model for children between the ages of 12 and 24 months old. And like I said, I've actually used this model for kids up until 2.5, kind of before the time that they're appropriate for more traditional PCIT. So these techniques are drawn from PCIT for toddlers. PCIT for toddlers really focuses on increasing emotional regulation and building self-esteem in toddlers through teaching parents supportive and nurturing parenting practices. And so through this treatment modality, parents really learn how to effectively soothe their child when they experience a big emotion. And hopefully you will learn today as well. And also, though, as I mentioned before, teaching parents how to provide positive attention for children's positive behaviors. So what research shows is that these parenting skills learned during treatment not only lead to increased emotion regulation, but also a secure and trusting parent-child relationship. A secure and trusting parent-child relationship is really foundational for everything else that a child learns throughout life, and actually is kind of the foundation for children also behaving better, listening, so being more compliant. We also see through PCIT for toddlers that there is an increase in language development and an overall decrease in parent stress, because parents walk away from treatment feeling like they have a set of tools to address their child's difficulties. So not only do we see behavior change and an improved relationship, but parents feel more confident at the end of treatment because they feel like they can really handle whatever comes their way. So let's start with, how do we attend to positive behaviors? And I'm going to teach you about the pride skills today. The pride skills are drawn from parent-child interaction therapy, the traditional model. The toddler model adds an extra pride skill that has an E. So we're going to be talking about the pride skills with an extra E. And let's go through what those look like. So P stands for praise. And really what we're striving for are specific labeled praises for positive things that your toddler does. So a lot of times we find ourselves saying to kids things like, great, I love it, awesome, nice job. And even though these words really make kids feel good inside and will increase their confidence, it doesn't necessarily lead to behavior change, because children, even from the ages of 12 months up until 7, have a really hard time kind of connecting the praise that was said to what they were doing in the moment that you're praising. So we really want to get specific and labeled with the praises that we give. So for example, thank you so much for sharing those blocks with me. I love that you're sitting in your high chair calmly right now. Nice job keeping your food on your tray. Now your kiddo hears that and knows, ooh, mom or dad loves when I do X, Y, and Z. And guess what? Kids love getting attention. So if they're getting attention for something that they're doing well, they're going to do it more because they want to continue getting that attention. So really specific label praise is going to reinforce positive behavior, thereby increasing the possibility that such behavior continues. You also really want to try to pay attention to what we call the positive opposite. So basically, what you do is you sit down and you write down what are all the problematic things that my kiddo is doing right now, right? So we saw on there aggression, maybe fussiness, whining, right? Those could be things that are problematic. Now you're thinking to yourself, what are the opposites of those behaviors? What do I want my child to do instead? Positive opposite of aggression, save hands. Positive opposite of whininess, asking politely. So you're now taking those positive opposites and you now want to pay attention to any time that your child is exhibiting that positive opposite and give it a labeled praise. So your kiddo comes up to you and says, milk, please. I love how you asked so nicely. Of course you can have some milk. Or maybe your kiddo is getting really frustrated, but is keeping their hands to themselves. I see you're frustrated. I'm really proud of you for keeping your hands to yourself. You're now going to be reinforcing these positive opposites. And guess what? The problematic behaviors that you don't like will start to decrease while the positive opposites are increasing. What is R for? R is for reflect. This is basically repeating back what your toddler says. It can be a sound effect that they're making. It can be an approximation of a word if their speech isn't clear yet. It can be a full word. It can be a 2 to 3 word phrase. Whatever your toddler says, you repeat it back. So for example, your child's like, up, up. You can say, you want me to pick you up, right? That's reflecting back what they're saying. Maybe your child is driving a car around going zoom, zoom, zoom. You just repeat it back, zoom, zoom, zoom. And what this does is really increases the quality and frequency of your child's speech. If you are reflecting what your child is saying, first and foremost, they're going to feel like, wow, what I have to say is pretty cool because my parents reflecting it back. They're going to feel like they are fully understood by you. And that gives them the confidence to continue to try to express themselves verbally. So that's not necessarily a skill that comes naturally for toddlers. It can be hard to put thoughts into words. So if you are reflecting back, that's going to increase their confidence and make them really feel good about trying to continue to express themselves with words. And guess what? If they're better able to express themselves with words, you're going to see less aggression. You're going to see, less things maybe like fighting, hitting, tantruming, because now they're able to express themselves with words instead of resorting to these other methods in order to express themselves. All right, imitate. What is I stands for imitate. Okay, this is imitating your toddler's actions and keeping your play on their developmental level. So when you are just playing along with your kiddo, you're really trying to follow their lead in the play. If your kiddo is stacking 2 blocks on top of each other, guess what? You're going to try to also just stack a couple of blocks. Kind of, refraining from that temptation of building this like magnificent tower with the blocks, because what can happen is for kids, if they're looking at what they're making and now they say that yours is much more elaborate, they can actually start to feel a little bit bad about their own capabilities and feel like the expectation is something bigger and better. And we want kids to feel really confident and good about what they are already capable of doing. So you want to try to keep your play on their developmental level. This also will express to them that you're approving of their chosen activities. And if you're imitating and playing along, so rather than just sitting back and observing and maybe making some comments, you're actually in there, right? You're building, you're drawing, whatever it might be, you're playing with cars. What this is going to do is really teach appropriate play skills. Now you're giving your child opportunities to practice things like sharing, like turn taking. For the little kiddos, you are getting them used to what it looks like to have some of that parallel, like side-by-side play. Maybe your kiddo is stacking some blocks and you add one. Guess what? Now that's becoming more cooperative, collaborative play. And these are things that we want to see in our children, the ability to play well with others. So if you're imitating and playing along, it gives them the opportunity to learn what it looks like to play appropriately from you and to practice these more collaborative social and play skills. D is for describe. This is really describing the positive things that your toddler does. So it's giving a play by play, and this can be done in play based activities. It can also be done during like acts of daily living. So thinking about in a play based forum, if your kid is playing with a car, descriptions would be that kind of color commentary that sports broadcasters give, such as you're driving the car down the road. Now you're making a turn around the corner. You're driving it up the hill and zoom, you made it go back down. And what this does is really helps your toddler maintain attention. We know toddlers have short attention spans. They're from one thing to the next. If you are actively describing what they are doing, it will help them stay engaged in one activity for a longer amount of time. We can also use this, though, to be shaping behaviors that we need to see, whether it be assisting with getting dressed in the morning or helping clean up. If we take that first example of assisting with getting dressed, right? Maybe you're trying to get your kiddo ready for daycare in the morning. And so you announce, all right, it's time to get dressed. I'm walking into your room to pick out some clothes. And you even see your kiddo kind of watching. You're watching me go into your room. You're starting to follow me. I love that you're joining. Oh, you touched the shirt. Looks like you're ready to put your shirt on. Oh, now you're raising your hands. What this does is it keeps them focused on the activity. It also makes it more playful and enjoyable rather than time to get dressed. All right, hands up. All right, here you go. There's your shirt. Now pants, right? That's not fun. That's not enjoyable for a toddler. And for toddlers, it's all about play and engagement and interaction. And so describing all of these behaviors, even parts of getting dressed, parts of helping with cleanup, or whether it be brushing teeth, can help them stay engaged. And once again, you're providing attention to appropriate behaviors, which indicates approval, and therefore your kiddo will want to do it more. E is for enjoy. So while using these skills, you're just showing your child that you enjoy spending time with them. This is going to help to create a warm connection between you and your child. And you can convey this by pats on the back, any physical touch, animation in your facial expressions, enthusiasm in your voice. And the extra E is probably the best one of all, emotion labeling. This is really labeling your toddler's feelings, both positive and negative. So for example, you look really excited to be at the park today. Oh, you seem really frustrated that your tower fell down. You seem really sad that we can't have a snack right now. What this does is it increases your toddler's emotional vocabulary. Once again, they're now able to connect words to their internal state, which should lead to their starting to be able to express themselves verbally when they're having these big feelings. But it also provides validation of those feelings. It just makes them feel seen and understood. And that can really go a long way. All right, so let's go into another poll. Now that we talked about our pride skills, what pride skill do you think would be the most helpful right now? If you were to focus on one skill for the next week, which skill would you really like to try to use more often? All right, we're seeing some responses come through. All right, it looks like the top one here is emotion labeling, which I absolutely love. Labeling your toddler's feelings is so helpful. Labeled praises, that's another top one here. So great. So a lot of people are wanting to focus on emotion labeling, praising, and describing, which is all excellent. All of the pride skills are really good. But sometimes it's nice to try to just take one or two and say, I'm really going to focus on this pride skill for this week and really get kind of a knack for it. All right, so when should you be using these pride skills and emotion labeling? So one ideal situation is that you're actually having 5 minutes of one-on-one play with your child. We call this special time. It's a time when you put out 2 to 3 toys, you're away from distractions. So phone is put away from a TV, siblings are not part of it, other caregivers, it's just one-on-one, you and your child. And this is really a time during which you and your toddler can connect and just enjoy each other. This is applicable for kids of all ages. Having special quality time one-on-one each day with a parent is so important. And what is most important about this time is that it's really child led. Kids are given just so many commands throughout the day from the minute they get up to the minute they go to bed. So, this is 5 minutes of their being able to be in the lead. They're making the decisions of how to play. But really, then the ultimate goal is past special time for you to be using these pride skills and emotion labeling throughout the day as well. So you're thinking high intensity, high frequency of these pride skills during special time, and then sprinkling these skills in throughout the day as consistently as possible, because that's really where you're going to see behavior change. And so, what we see is that paying attention to the positive and providing emotional validation can really be extremely powerful in improving toddlers' emotional and behavioral regulation. So, let's talk about handling minor misbehaviors, right? So, we talked about when things are going well, what can you do? Well, when things go a little off course, how can you be handling that? And when I'm talking about minor misbehaviors, I'm talking about the things that toddlers do that are ultimately kind of to get a rise out of you. All right. So these are different situations than the big emotions where they're overwhelmed with emotion and they need your support. This is more of those behaviors like dropping food on the floor, turning the lights on and off, turning the water on and off, right? These things that kind of can turn into like this cat and mouse game. And the kind of key way that you can figure out if your child is doing this in order to get your attention is that typically while doing it, they're looking over to see what your reaction is going to be. So the key is actually to underreact, to not give attention to it. And I know that sounds so hard, right? Because you want to jump in and be like, stop turning the lights on and off. It's so annoying. But the ideal way of handling this is to look away, keep a neutral facial expression, not give any attention at all. And what you're going to do instead is redirect your attention to something else, a distraction, a new focal point of interest. So let's take an example of kiddo, you're playing maybe with like play food and some pots and pans. Everything's going well, and all of a sudden your toddler's banging the pots and pans together, and it's like so overwhelming. It's so loud, right? You're going to do your best to not say anything about the banging of the pots and pans, but rather turn your attention to something else. So you might say, "Ooh, I just found some fruit in the refrigerator. I'm finding a strawberry and a banana. I'm going to put it in the blender to make a smoothie. It's going to be so delicious." And what tends to happen is when you underreact to that behavior that you don't like and redirect all of your attention to something else, eventually your kiddo follows suit, joins in, and that's a beautiful opportunity to give a labeled praise. So maybe your kid puts down the pots and pans, or maybe not even puts them down, but put a piece of fruit and puts it in the pot. That's when you return your attention. You just put a thing of corn in your pot. It looks like you're making something. I'm so happy that you're playing with the toy food with me, right? So you're using kind of that selective attention, underreaction and redirection to your advantage to extinguish some of these minor misbehaviors. All right, let's get into what is a big emotion. And as always, I'm running out of time. So forgive me if I'm speaking quickly, but lots of information to get out to you all. So I'm not going to read this word for word, but basically a big emotion is an overwhelming emotional reaction that is difficult for your child to control. Anger, frustration. You might see a big, huge change in facial expression and vocalizations. You might even see some physical aggression, destruction of property, right? So you can tell your kiddo is overwhelmed, just cannot keep it together. I have 5 steps for you to use in handling big emotions, and these are called the CARE steps. And you can use them in any order. They're not meant to be used sequentially. And you can use one, you can use 3, you can use all 5, whatever works best for you. I want to preface these steps with saying you are not expected to use CARES every time your toddler has a big emotion. That would be emotionally exhausting for you. It's basically impossible to do, especially if you have other kids in the household or other responsibilities that you need to tend to. And it's also important actually that we are giving our children opportunities to practice self-regulation. So as long as you're using the CARES as consistently as possible, giving them that support, modeling for them how to regulate emotionally, we can also then give them opportunities to kind of figure it out on their own. It's about a balance. So C is for come in. You're going to move your body physically close to the child. Okay. So if you're across the room, you're going to come in to where your child is, but make your movements calm and slow. Try not to freak out, right? It's not, oh, no, no, I'm so upset. Here I come. I'll help you. It's coming in slow, calmly, right? Using a very calm tone of voice, because that's going to help regulate your child. By moving in closer to your child, she or he sees that you are present and available to him or her. This is going to increase that sense of reliability, right? Now, your child knows when I'm having a big emotion, I can't handle it, I feel out of control. My mom or dad or my teacher, whoever it might be, is going to come in and help me work through this. A is for assist. So if the big emotion is due to a problem that your child has encountered, you're going to assist them in solving it. So for example, if the big emotion is because maybe there's a toy on a shelf that's a bit too high, and so your child is getting really frustrated and losing it and starting to cry and whine and really fall apart, coming in saying, "Oh, mommy is here to help you. I can help you get that toy." And the key here is actually to perform with your child versus doing it for your child. So it might be picking them up to reach it so they can ultimately take it down on their own rather than just saying, "Oh, here it is. I got it." Right. So you're performing with versus doing. And this is really going to establish early teaching experiences, modeling for kids like how to problem solve and work through these issues that arise. R is for reassure. This is really just a verbal statement that your child will be taken care of. Something just like, daddy is here to help. It's okay. I love you. I'm here to support you. And this is really going to create an opportunity for increased trust. Your child is going to feel like, oh, wow, mom or dad or my teacher is here to help when I'm having a tough time. E is for emotional validation. This goes back to that emotion labeling, right? So in these times of big emotions, you're wanting to label your child's feelings so they're building that emotional vocabulary. Once again, this is creating a sense of understanding and support. And last, S is for soothe. And this is using a very soothing, calm tone of voice and also using soothing touch. Okay, so this is maybe, some pats on the back. Maybe you might even go back to like those rocking days when your child was an infant. They might need that again to help regulate their nervous system and calm them down. This is giving a physical cue that everything is okay and actually modeling for your child too, some of the things that they can do for themselves, right? Maybe your child will start to learn, oh, I can kind of rock back and forth a little bit when I'm feeling upset. Or maybe it's bringing in a stuffy, saying like, oh, Lion is here to help. And now your kid is starting to connect. Oh, when I'm feeling upset, I can go get my special stuffy and use that as support. And this is really modeling for the child how to remain relaxed and calm. Right, so let's go to another poll. Now that you've heard about the care steps, which ones are you already using? Because some of these already come naturally to parents. They didn't need to necessarily be taught. So what do you think you're doing? Are you already coming in? Are you already assisting, reassuring, emotionally validating, soothing? Great, so lots of responses coming in here. Looks like things are pretty much even so far. Now that coming in is the front runner, so maybe a skill that comes a little bit more naturally along with that soothing. Perfect. So it looks like a lot of you are already using a lot of these skills kind of evenly across the board. So this kind of gives you an idea too of what are the things I'm already doing really well and what are the things that I can kind of add to my repertoire to utilize when my child's having a big emotion. All right, so now we're going to talk about cares for you as the parent. And this is a 5-step model for managing your own thoughts and emotions in response to your toddler, right? Remembering that you are your child's biggest role model. You are showing your child how to regulate your emotions. So unfortunately, as a parent, if we're losing it a lot and getting overly frustrated or getting really angry and raising our voice, our kids ultimately realize that the way that they should handle their emotions is by doing the same thing. So how can we keep our cool? C is for check cognitions, clue into yourself. This is kind of that cognitive framework. If anyone's ever been in cognitive therapy before, it's all about recognizing kind of automatic maladaptive thoughts that you might have and reframing them into more appropriate thoughts. Because what we find, or what we know, is that our cognitions, our thoughts about situations, determine our feelings in that situation. So if we can change our cognitions, we can ultimately change our feelings as well. Might not fully take away that stress and anger or anxiety, but might just take the edge off of it. So before beginning special time, remember that 5 minutes of one-on-one time with your toddler, or when your toddler is having a big emotion, or just during a stressful time, in general, you want to clue into yourself, check your cognitions. What are you thinking about you and your toddler? Are you potentially thinking, oh, here he goes again. He's such a bad kid. I'm raising a really naughty child, right? If that's where your thoughts are going, first and foremost, you're not alone. A lot of parents have that thought, right? But can you reframe that thought to something more appropriate or helpful, such as he's having a tough moment? This moment will pass. He's not a bad child. He has things that he struggles with, and he has things that he's really, really good at, right? That might take the edge off. That frustration might make you feel more hopeful about the situation rather than starting to feel kind of really devastated or really stressed out. A is for assist yourself. All right. So if you are not emotionally ready to assist your toddler with their big emotion, maybe you are overwhelmed with something yourself, and that's okay. Remember what I said earlier, you are not expected to come in and use those cares during every big emotion that your toddler has, right? You also need your time. You are a human being. But there are things that you can do to help yourself be more ready to engage. And this might be implementing some relaxation techniques, right? If you have time to step away, maybe you do a trade-off with your partner, right? Like a tap out, like, here I come, I need a moment, I need you to come in and take over. And that is totally okay. That's what parenting is about. You might even go take a quick shower. You might call someone in your support network. Okay. Those are things that, if you have the time and capability, that's what you can do. But I'm realistic. I know that a lot of times, right, parents are kind of on their own with their children, and you can't step away. You can't go take a shower. You have to take care of your children. So even in those moments, though, you can maybe take a deep breath, right? Maybe you have all your kids talking to you at once. They're demanding one thing after another. It's getting overwhelming. I think parenthood is about sensory overload, right? Like, it's just too much to handle right now. Even just turning away from us for a second from your children, take a big deep breath. One, you are now modeling for your children how to handle yourself in times of stress, what you can do for yourself, to calm down. But also taking a deep breath, even though it might seem so simple, can really help calm the nervous system, helps relax those shoulders. You can also use what we call progressive muscle relaxation. This is just a tensing and a releasing of the muscle groups. This can be done, on the go, where you're just kind of clenching your fist and then letting it go. And this kind of induces a sense of relaxation. R is for reassuring yourself. Okay. Just as you are to reassure your child that you're there to help when they're having a big emotion, you want to reassure yourself. Parenting presents with challenges, and no one technique works for all kids or works every single time. So you might find a technique that works really well, and then all of a sudden one day it doesn't. That's what parenting is all about. So using that positive self-talk, right? When you're having a challenging moment, letting yourself know, right? Like, this is a challenging moment. I'm doing the best I can to deal with it. I am overall a really good parent. I'm doing what's best for my child. What also can be really helpful is reminding yourself of tender moments that you had, right? So maybe your child is having a big emotion. Maybe you had to say no, that your child couldn't have a snack before dinner, and now there's this big meltdown, really upset, right? You're like, oh no, here we go again, another tantrum for the day, another big emotion. But remembering maybe tender moments earlier in that day. But you know what? When he woke up today and he smiled at me and he said, oh, good morning, that felt so good. And that was so sweet. This moment will pass, and there will be so many moments of positivity. And that kind of speaks to foreseeing future events that will take place with your child, bringing joy. So in the moment, it might seem overwhelming. If they're having a big emotion, having a tough time, maybe the bedtime routine usually goes smoothly. Maybe books before bed is really a nice time, reminding yourself during that stressful moment, this is tough right now, but I know I'm going to have a really nice moment with her before bed. And we're really going to be able to connect. E is for emotional awareness, right? Toddlers and babies are remarkably good at sensing emotions. They seem to track and respond to stress. So guess what? If you're feeling stressed, probably your toddler or child is sensing that, will feed off of that as well. So when we're talking about special time, remember that 5 minutes of one-on-one time, this really allows for fun and connection to be experienced when you engage in play with positive thoughts and emotions. So trying to kind of have that positivity come through. Once again, if you're not in that space and you're not emotionally in the right space to have that special time, maybe doing something for yourself before engaging. But also, when responding to big emotions, being aware of your own emotional state can help you be more planned in your response rather than reactive, right? So if you're getting overwhelmed and you're not recognizing that and doing something about it, you might just react, right? And usually that reaction tends to be yelling, big frustration. And not to say that if this has happened before, you're a bad parent. I've been there myself. It happens. We are human beings. We're not perfect, right? But if we can be aware of our emotional state, ooh, things are bubbling over. I'm starting to feel really stressed. This is the time where I need to take a deep breath, take a step back. Now we can have more of a planned response and how to deal with the situation rather than that reactive, angry, frustrated response. And lastly, being sensitive and soothing. So just as you're using a soothing voice with your toddler, being kind and sensitive to yourself and how you reassure yourself and the tone that you're using in your own self-talk. So it's not like, you can do this, you get it together, come on, let's go. It's a nice, calm, you got this. It will be okay. This is a tough moment, but things are going to get better. You're going to have a great time with him tonight during book reading. This is just a blip. That's a tough time to get through. And remind yourself that learning is a process of trial and error. Plot and adjust courses as you go. Like I said at the beginning, there's no straightforward playbook for parenting. I will be honest in saying that here I have all of this training through the different modalities for working with children. And there are times where I encounter situations with my own children and think, oh my goodness, how do I deal with this? What do I do? Or I tried this technique and it's not working. I need to adjust this course and kind of get creative. Okay. If something doesn't work or stops working, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean that you're a bad parent. It just means that parenting is a process of trial and error, and you learn as you go. So to wrap up, we have a couple of polls before Q&A time. So the first, and if you can just put this into the chat box, the first question is, what would be some good ways of assisting yourself to better manage your own thoughts and emotions? So thinking about that assisting, I talked about some relaxation strategies, ways of stepping back. Can you just put into the chat, what would be some good ways that you feel yourself would be some good ways of assisting yourself during stressful moments? Seeing deep breaths, knowing when to tap out, ask for help, progressive relaxation, deep breathing, taking a deep breath, counting to 10. I like that. Stepping away, always a great idea if you can. Taking a moment, deep breath, physically moving away if possible, asking for help. Yes, it is always okay to ask for help. Knowing when you need a break. That's beautiful. Self-talk to remind yourself that you are doing the best that you can. Tag teaming with family members, reminding yourself of tender moments, asking for a hug from someone else. These are all beautiful, beautiful responses, right? And remembering that you need to do what is best for you. I love reminding yourself that this moment is fleeting, right? You look at that moment in comparison to all the moments in the day. Typically with most kids, right, the positive moments do outnumber the not so good ones or the negative ones. Great. Thank you for those responses. And our last poll, what emotions of your own do you think your toddler has picked up on before? Um, I'll be the first one to say, I think my kiddos have probably picked up on my frustration before. So we have some anxiety, fear. Yeah, kids are very in tune with anxiety, fear, stress, frustration, physical pain, indecision, sadness, anger, anxiety, impatience. Yes, yeah. So, our kids pick up on all of these emotions, right? But also they pick up on positive emotions as well. So, not only are we teaching children how to manage kind of those negative, those more uncomfortable feelings, but also positive, and our positive emotions can have a positive effect on our kiddos as well. Excellent. So thank you so much for all of your participation in the polls. I'll open it up to a little bit of Q&A time. I think we have about 10 minutes, and I think Beth will field some questions. If you have a question, you can put it in the Q&A box.
Yeah, the Q&A box should be next to the chat for you guys if you want to enter questions in there, and then I'm going to offer them to Dr. Stapert. Our first question is, can these strategies be used to work with older children from 5 up, or might this be infantilizing, or should we use other techniques?
Beautiful question. So the pride skills, all of those pride skills can definitely be used for kids up until the age of 7, actually all the way up until 10. When our kids become between the ages of 7 and 10, we use less descriptive statements. We might actually mix like unlabeled praise and labeled praise together, because older kids actually can start to pair the praise with what they're doing in the moment. But yes, all of the pride skills are going to apply to kids basically up until the age of 10. The care skills, yes, you can still use with older kids. What you need to be more mindful of when kids get older is the big emotion more intentional in nature and more so trying to get me to acquiesce to something, right? So it's not necessarily my kiddo is overwhelmed with emotion and doesn't have the capability of self-regulating. It's more of now he's tantruming and kicking and screaming on the floor just because he wants me to say, okay, fine, you can have dessert. Like I'll give you an extra cookie just if you stop doing that, right? So you can still use cares with older kids, right? Coming in and helping them. You're going to adapt it based on the age. But you want to be more mindful of when you need to use that differential attention, right? This is more negative attention seeking to get his way. And so I actually need to withdraw my attention versus using cares in a supportive way because there's a big emotion.
Great, thank you. Our next question we did have a few people ask if a recording will be available. So I just wanted to let you all know that we will link on our psychology workshops calendar, the link to the recording, probably in a week or two that will be available. Next question, is it okay to label how you're feeling during the moment?
100%. I would actually recommend doing so. Just as you're wanting to label your child's feelings, it's really great for your kiddo to hear you say, I'm feeling really frustrated. I think I said it this morning. I'm feeling really frustrated, overwhelmed right now, guys. Like I need a minute. That is great because what you are modeling for your children is the ability to express your feelings to someone else so that they understand kind of what's going on for you in that moment and what you need. So definitely label those feelings for yourself. It's excellent modeling for your kids.
Thank you. We had a few different questions, so I'm going to bucket them together about physical hitting, biting, pinching, etc., physical responses, especially to siblings. So how can you manage that?
Yeah. So when it comes to physical responses, so anything that is aggressive in nature, there's going to be a different approach for the younger kiddos than for the older ones. For kids who are 2.5 and older, I do recommend having a consequence in place for that. It's a little bit too much to get into for this webinar, but there's a variety of consequences, right? Some parents choose to use like a timeout from playing if their child is becoming aggressive. Other parents might choose to do like a loss of privilege, right? Like you hit your sibling, so you're going to lose dessert tonight. With the younger kiddos, there's actually a no hurting protocol. So for kids between the ages of 12 months, probably up until about 2.5, unless your kiddo is more advanced and you think that they're ready for like a removal of privilege or a timeout, what you do is if the child hits, you want to get down to their level, hold their hands together in yours, maintain direct eye contact, and say, no hurting. You're going to then look away for 3 full seconds. It's kind of like a mini timeout from attention. You're going to return your gaze, maintain that direct eye contact again, and say, no hurting, gentle hands. And then at that point, you want to turn your toddler away from whatever they hit, whatever they pinched, and towards something else using kind of that redirection that might engage their attention. That way you are kind of reducing the risk of them engaging in the aggressive act again. So you turn them physically away, distract them with something else. And then what's key is with aggression, anytime your kiddo is using safe hands, you jump on that opportunity to praise them for that. Like, I love that you're having safe hands while you're playing with your brother right now.
Great, thank you. We have a question regarding additional support such as counseling for older toddlers. Would you recommend play therapy or art therapy?
So with older toddlers, I'm assuming that we're talking more about like kids like 2 and 3 years old. It's really going to depend on the presenting issue. If it's more of a behavioral concern, I would recommend more parent training. Really, kids this age benefit most from parents learning different strategies to support these kids in behaving differently, or even if it comes to anxiety, managing that anxiety. So when we're talking about toddlers, I typically don't recommend any type of individual therapy because it's really hard also for toddlers to take what was kind of learned or expressed in an individual play therapy session, which would be 45 minutes, and then apply it outside of that session. Really, what we need to do is teach the parents how to become the child's therapist and use some different techniques in the home. And so that tends to be the best approach. The difference would be if there's a toddler who's maybe experienced some type of trauma. Now, PCIT is a trauma-informed treatment, so it actually is really great for addressing trauma, but then some clinicians might also choose to do some like play-based therapy to kind of work through and process that trauma. So typically I would say for toddlers of all ages, the younger and older, more parent training, more family therapy is indicated to really address the issues.
And this will be our last question. We have quite a few other great questions. Thank you all for submitting them to our Q&A. We will answer a couple of these questions that we don't have time to get to now on our social feeds. So if you follow us at Manhattan Psychology Group, we will post questions with Dr. Stapert's answers on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, et cetera, and some slides. So look for that in the coming couple of days. So our last question for this workshop: does the literature suggest that using cares with toddlers can help lessen the big emotions for the older siblings?
So I guess I'm not exactly sure what that question is referring to, meaning if the toddlers managing their emotions better will help the older siblings doing so as well, or if cares for the older siblings would be helpful. So I don't know if clarification is possible. If not, I can kind of take a stab at it.
Yeah, if you're still on and you want to send a second question to the Q&A, please go for it. Otherwise, perhaps Dr. Stapert, I would go with your first inference of the question, because that's how I took it.
Yeah. So I think that using the cares with the younger siblings, I think once again, now you are modeling, support, how to calm. I think ultimately, right, if the toddler is learning how to handle big emotions, then I would think that the older siblings also wouldn't be triggered as much, because a lot of times older siblings' feelings can be triggered, or their outbursts can be triggered by the younger ones doing something that are frustrating or annoying or overwhelming. I would say though that if you're also wanting to help your older kids with emotion regulation, then they're also going to need your support. They're going to be seeing you model emotion regulation for yourself. They'll learn from that. But if it's not necessarily in response to the toddler's emotional regulation and it's more due to something else, they might need their own support, whether it be through their own therapy or more through, you sitting down and kind of guiding them through things that they can do themselves, right? So when so-and-so is having a big feeling and you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe you can take a break in your room and do something to help calm yourself down. So might need some additional support if their big emotions aren't in direct relation to their younger siblings' big emotions.
Great. Thank you all for submitting such great questions. As I mentioned, we will address a couple of these other questions on our social feeds if you want to look there for additional responses. Thank you, Dr. Stapert, not only for your wonderful presentation, but for answering so many of our questions live. And if anyone has any additional questions or wants more information, you can email us at info@manhattanpsychologygroup.com. Our phone number is also on the screen. And then, of course, reach out if you think that you as a parent for parent training or your child could receive additional support from Manhattan Psychology Group. We'd happy to hear more about your particular situation and recommend what we think could best support you and your family. So thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.